Gravedigger, a Dave Brandstetter mystery, Book 6. Author, Joseph Hansen. Publisher, Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 13. It came on to rain in the night. In the morning, they inched in Cecil's van along shimmering freeways, clogged with cars and trucks, over the glass towers of downtown Los Angeles. The sky was slate gray. The rain fell softly, but with no hint of ever quitting. They spent the day in noisy offices, jostling corridors, elevators, dark line-up rooms, overheated courtrooms with assorted police officers, clerks, bailiffs, judges, with Abe Greenglass, with Deputy Hopkinson, held a Vosper for a little while, and for a little while with a young woman camera operator who had seen Miles Edwards drop something into Cecil's hanging jacket at the television studio. With Miles unshaven, pale, sullen, and with Miles' father, a sick and shrunken-looking man who moved like an invalid and was acting as Miles' attorney. The hours dragged. There was more waiting than anything else. Standing around on marble floors tired Dave and made his bruises and torn ligaments ache. Now and then he studied Cecil, waiting for the boy's exhilaration to wear off, waiting for him to get bored with making Miles suffer. But mostly his thoughts strayed at first to Amanda and what learning the truth about Miles was going to do to her. Then to the Westover matter, sorting through all the places he'd been, all the people he'd talked to, all the words they'd said to him. Late in the afternoon, when the courts began emptying out, and the plaintiffs and defendants and lawyers with briefcases pushed in herds out the tall doors into the rain and the darkening day, he found a payphone, not in use, and rang Salazar. "The Nevada plates are stolen," Salazar said. "They don't belong to any 1958 Impala. They come off a Toyota pickup in a town called Beatty, Amargosa Desert." "Is that a fact?" Dave said. "Listen, thank you for finding a witness to my burglary." "Any time," Salazar said. "When do I get that lobster?" "I'm going to spend a couple of days in bed," Dave said. "The doctor was right. I should have stayed in the hospital. I'm not healing as fast as I used to." Of course, he'd get out of bed if Westover came from hiding in response to the letter. "I'll call you next week." "Take it easy," Salazar said. Cecil was beside Dave when he hung up the phone. He said, "You want to drop the charges now? Forgive and forget?" He looked a little wan. "Had your fun," Dave said. "It wasn't as much fun as I hoped," Cecil said. "Tell the truth, I'm a little sick about it. A little ashamed." "I thought you would be," Dave said. "Who do we see?" "Down here," Abe Greenglass said, and led the way. Dave sat propped by pillows in the bed on the loft. He had doped himself when they got home from dinner at Max's last night and had slept from 8 until noon. Cecil had brought him breakfast in bed, coffee, fresh orange juice, pancakes and sausage, the plates covered by foil to keep the heat in and the rain off. The rain whispered on the shingles overhead, but the loft was warm, fire crackling in the grate below. "While you were fixing breakfast," Dave said, "I tried to telephone Jay's Good Used Cars in Perez. Jay doesn't answer his phone. No one answers for him. On a hunch, having viewed Jay's operation, I tried Lucky's strike. I thought Jay might be drinking his lunch. He wasn't. Lucky gave me Jay's home number. Jay is not at home. You want me to drive down and find him?" Cecil rose with his empty plate and took Dave's. "What do I ask him?" "When I find him," he started for the stairs and turned back, "if he sold a used green and white Impala." "To Serenity Westover?" Dave nodded. "On the day Azrael shot the deputies and ran. Show him her picture. That car is just the kind old Jay specializes in." Cecil blinked. His jaw was a little slack. "You mean you think that skinny blonde girl the gas station kid told you about is her? She's alive? She's with her father?" "Watch the commercials," Dave said. A girl can have hair any color she likes. A girl can lose weight any time she likes. Just pop a little pill. Or live under a lot of stress, Cecil said. Only, what about the Nevada license plates? Stolen in Nevada, didn't you say? Dave shrugged and was pleasantly surprised. This morning his shoulder hardly hurt at all. Maybe she was trying to catch up with Asriel. Had some reason to know he'd make for Nevada. And that's where his van ended up. I know that, Cecil made a face. But why would she want to catch up with him? I sure as hell wouldn't. Why would she stay with him for years? She was at that ranch with him while he murdered 6 girls. Remember? Cecil blew out a long breath. He gave his head a shake. He went on down the stairs with the plates. Dave heard him dump another chunk of pine log on the fire and set the screen back. Heard him walk down the room to the outside door. Cecil called. This is weird. This has got to be the weirdest mess on record. No wonder you almost got killed. The door opened to the sound of rain and closed. When he returned, bearing a fresh mug of hot coffee for Dave, he was frowning to himself. He shrugged into the corduroy car coat and fastened the pegs, put on his leather cap and driving gloves. He bent and kissed Dave, tasting of sweet, creamy coffee. He stood looking down at Dave, forehead creased. What if Westover comes? I don't like leaving you alone, not all battered up like you are. How can you defend yourself if he turns mean? All he wants is the money, Dave said. What if his crazy daughter comes with him? Who knows what she wants? She's supposed to be dead, remember? She won't come. That would spoil their plans. He worked up what he hoped was a reassuring smile. Stop worrying. Nothing's going to happen to me. Don't forget to take her picture. It's in the top left drawer of the desk. And concentrate on your driving, all right? Don't speed trying to get back here. Cecil looked doubtful, but he went down the stairs again. Before he left, he called, I'll phone you as soon as I find old Jay. I'm locking the door. It didn't stay locked. Cecil hadn't been gone 10 minutes when Dave heard footsteps cross the brick courtyard and the tinkle of keys. He reached for his pants. The door opened with the falling of the rain on the bricks for a background. Amanda called. Dave? Sounded a little timid. Oh, he said. Warm yourself at the fire. I'll be right there. Help yourself to a drink. Getting the trousers on one-handed took time. He went down the stairs. She stood in front of the fire in knickers, boots, a fur hat, and the long muffler. She smiled and held out a glass to him with scotch in it and ice. Her smile was sheepish. I'd like you to forgive me if you can. For what? Making a mistake? He took the glass. Thank you. He drank from the glass. Don't brood about it. How were you supposed to know what he was? He didn't tell you, right? I mean, for the names I called you, she said. For the awful things I said to you. What's important, he said, is that you're all right. You're going to be all right, aren't you? She looked into her glass. She sat on the couch. She looked at the burning logs. After a while, she said, not right away. She looked at Dave. He admitted it all to me. Everything you'd said. That's nice. We won't have to ask Abram, Dave said. I think he'd be a little embarrassed telling you about those pictures. Miles thought if he confessed and said he was sorry, we could go right on. She gave a little humorless laugh, a little shake of her head. I've just come from him, and do you know, I was tempted. That's why I came flying to you. I know he's rotten, but he is so damned beautiful, Dave. He thinks so, Dave said. You'll get over it. She took a sip of her drink, rummaged cigarettes from her shoulder bag, held the pack up to Dave. He took a cigarette. She took one. Dave lit them both. She dropped the long red pack back into the bag and frowned up at Dave through smoke. Women sometimes make a go of it with someone like Miles. Someone sexually like Miles. Not someone ethically like Miles. Dave said. Sure, some women do. So I've read. I've never met one. I've met one lately that didn't make a go of it. He stopped talking. My God, he said. How stupid I am. He set his drink on the hearth and went for his jacket. You're going to have to excuse me. I have to see that woman. You got the Jaguar? She said. Lock up, will you? He said, and opened the door. Rain dripped off the jungle gym, whose red paint, small hands had worn down in places to the dull, still tubing. Rain glazed the yellow and blue crawl barrels, splashed in the gaudy little cars of the choo-choo that never moved, wept off the still steps of the slide, slithered down the shiny chute of the slide, and made a deep puddle at the foot of the chute. Rain pulled in the canvas sling. Seats of the chain hung swings. The low end of the gingham print seesaw drowned in a puddle. It looked sad, but the wide windows of the play school glowed and were pasted with cut-out paper daffodils. Dave worked the latch of the gate in the chain-link fence and crossed the yard. Halfway to the door, music met him. Noise, the rattle of toy drums and tin xylophones and tambourines. The high-pitched piping of small voices. He looked through the streaming glass of the door. They sat in a circle on their little red chairs and played and sang and kept time by clapping their hands and stamping their feet. If he knocked, he wouldn't be heard. He turned the cold, wet knob, pushed the door open, and put his head inside. The air was warm, moist, and smelled of little kids, graham crackers, banana peels, toilet accidents. He stepped inside and closed the door. The kids paid him no attention, nor did the massive moon-faced black woman in the gay patchwork smock. Banana Westover got up swiftly and came to him, looking alarmed. Serenity, have you found her? It's possible, but not to talk to. What do you mean? What happened? Nothing lately, Dave said. But about 10 years ago, something happened, and I'd like you to tell me about it. The kids were too loud for her to hear him. She lifted her hand to indicate that he was to follow her. They skirted the circle of little red chairs, stepping over spilled toys and storybooks and stuffed animals. She opened a door and waited for him to go through. Came in after him, shut the door. It was not a big office, and it was crowded with supplies, construction paper, jars of white paste, bottles of poster paint, shelves sagged. There were boxes of wax, crayons, of chalk, of small scissors, cheap paintbrushes. Cartons were stacked hip-deep, modeling clay, newsprint for painting. The desk was barely visible. She lifted an armload of stuff off a molded plastic chair with spindly steel legs for him to sit on. She sat behind the desk. The door was flimsy. The kids still loud, but it was just possible to talk. 10 years ago, Dave said, you caught your husband and Don Gillard involved in a homosexual act. Isn't that so? He didn't wait for her to answer. They'd had a long relationship, and it came to an end, suddenly, then and there. This was why you told me that there wouldn't be another woman in his life, wasn't it? Because you were the only woman he'd ever been physically interested in. Gillard had been willing to share him with you. But you weren't having that, were you? She had turned white. Where did you hear this? I pieced it together. You began it. Lyle told me how much he liked Gillard when he was small, how close the friendship was between Gillard and his father, how puzzled he was when it suddenly stopped. Close! Her mouth twisted in derision. Then Gillard added a few facts, and finally, his mother filled out the rest. She said that her son and your husband had spent every weekend of their lives together, even after you and Charles married. Is that true? What has this got to do with poor Serenity? It's ancient history, past and done with. I forgave Charles. He meant too much to me. He meant everything to me. This thing with Don, delayed adolescence, neurotic nonsense, she snorted. They weren't boys anymore. If you set out to find a man who isn't a boy anymore, Dave said, you're going to be a long time looking, and you haven't forgotten about it. It's not ancient history to you. Don Gallard's still the enemy. And that's why you never mentioned him to me when I asked you to tell me who your husband might run to when he was in trouble. They hadn't spoken in years, she said. That day when I found them naked in bed together was the last time they ever saw each other. They had a place they went to on those weekends, didn't they? Dave stood up. And you followed them there. Why? You'd watched them go off together 1,000 times. To the high Sierras, to the desert, to Baja, ocean fishing in a hired boat. So they said. Then one weekend, when Chaz was busy and Don took the kids, he made a mistake. And Serenity told me all about Uncle Don's little house in the woods, about finding so many of her daddy's things there. What things? Oh, clothes and things. Anna Westover smiled thinly. Out of the mouths of babes. It was fantastic. All those years I hadn't suspected a thing, and suddenly, at that moment, I knew. I knew and understood it all. It was up at Yucca Canyon, wasn't it? She stared. Yes. How'd you know? And you remembered it when I told you your husband had gone somewhere to hide? When I asked you if you couldn't suggest where that would be, but you kept your mouth shut. Because I never in the world would have thought he'd go back there. He promised me. She meant it. Doesn't divorce invalidate that kind of promise? Dave said. What's the address? Address? She laughed dryly. It's wilderness up there. The road's no more than a pair of ruts. I don't think it even has a name. Little box canyon, all overgrown. Dave stepped to the door. Can you leave me there? She pushed at her hair and laughed helplessly. You must be mad. It's been 10 years. I don't know how I got there. I simply followed them. Her voice trembled. Her eyes swam. I don't know how I got out. I was blind with outrage and hurt and disappointment and emotions. There aren't even any names for... She opened a desk drawer and fumbled tissues out of it to dry her eyes. No, Mr. Brandstetter, I'm afraid I cannot lead you there. She blew her nose. It's like a place in a nightmare, something you wake up from hoping you'll never sleep again. Did they rent it? Dave asked. What? She blinked, frowning. Rent it? No. They didn't rent it. Didn't I tell you? Don built it. It belonged to Don. He built it so they could have. But she didn't go on with that. It belonged to Don, she said again, dully. She shrugged. Perhaps it still does. Dave pulled open the door. Oh, bet on it. The chairs weren't in a circle anymore. They had been pushed against the wall. A game was going on that involved running, squealing, and falling down. Dave said to Anna Westover, I'll let you know, and walked down the long room, trying not to stumble over children. You've hurt yourself. Thelma Gallard was more noticing than Anna Westover had been. She pushed the screen door and put her head out into the rain to look down the stairs. You drove here with only one arm? It isn't too hard, Dave said. There's an automatic shift. May I come in? What's happened? Looking anxious, she pushed the screen door wider so he could enter. The kitchen was not as tidy as before. Now there were more dirty dishes, not just on the shelf by the sink, but on the table. She looked as if she hadn't combed her hair today. She was wearing the same faded jeans and torn sneakers, and this time a sweat top with a hood. Dark blue. Have you found Don? No, but with your help, I'm going to. She shut the door, shut out the cold breath of the rain. I'm not so sure of that. Don withdrew a lot of money from our savings, almost all. $20,000. She peered up at him. Did you know that? Was it to give Chase? Dave nodded. And Chase promptly lost it. If you were thinking Don used it to travel to some far place, he didn't. He's at his cabin in Yucca Canyon. She had started toward the dim hallway that led to the living room. She turned back. His cabin? What cabin? How did you happen to learn about the missing money? Dave asked. Well, I phoned the police because you said I should. It was a few days, and then a detective came. He asked a lot of questions. I couldn't tell him much, she smiled wanly. Oh, but you already know that. He said I should check through Don's papers, bills, letters, anything for clues to where he might have gone or why. Well, I looked, but I didn't find anything that meant anything. The detective said, check with the bank. At first, they wouldn't tell me. Then he went with me. She gave a little unhappy laugh. I never thought I'd ride in a police car in my life, and they let him see the account record, and that's how we found out. But it didn't help find him, did it? Dave moved toward the hall. Where are these papers? In his room? He found the open door to the room with the neatly made bed. Is this his room? Yes, she said it doubtfully. She stood in the door from the kitchen, fingers pressed against her mouth, eyes alarmed. But I've been through everything. He's so private. He hates for people to. Oh, I think he's with Westover, Dave said. And Westover may be a dangerous man to be with right now. He laid his hand on the arm in the sling. If it keeps him from getting hurt, he won't mind a little invasion of his privacy. The room had only one window, and the rain outside made the light from the window dim. Dave groped for a wall switch and turned on a lamp by the bed. He stepped inside, hearing her footsteps come down the hall and stop in the bedroom doorway, unwilling to come further. Don Gallard didn't give an impression of being able to intimidate anyone, but he had intimidated her. Closet, Dave asked. Chest? She jerked her chin. Bottom drawer. It was a green metal fishing tackle box. She got the key. Dave sat on the edge of the bed. The box on his knees where the lamplight would catch it. He unlocked it, lifted the lid, reached for his reading glasses, and remembered that the lens had popped out. He'd forgotten to ask Cecil to put it back. He squinted and sorted through the papers. None related to the cabinet-making business. These were personal, insurance, property payments, doctor bills, income tax. There was a membership in a so-called health club that was for homosexuals only. Though the paper didn't say so, there was a worn, soiled envelope of snapshots, big barrel-chested Gallard, slim little Westover. He tucked them back, frowning. You see what I mean? Thelma Gallard said. Dave grunted. Here was an envelope, marked in large type. Joint Consolidated Tax Bill. The flap was loose. He pulled a tax bill from the envelope. It wasn't easy for him to read without the glasses, but he made out the address on the bill, blurrily. It was for this place, shop and living quarters. He worked the bill back into its envelope and picked up another envelope like it and slid the bill out of that one. He held it under the lamp and narrowed his eyes, trying to focus. His heart bumped. Burro Trail, Yucca Canyon. He laid the bill in the green tin box, closed the lid, turned the key, held the box up to her. You never knew Don had a cabin that he built himself for weekends? Is that where he's gone? She said. I never knew. Dave stood up. May I use your phone again, please? He had to let the receiver dangle on its cord, knocking the wall while he turned the dial. He caught hold of the receiver and held it to his ear, not expecting Cecil to answer. It would be hours before Cecil got back from Perez. Dave's own voice answered on tape. He waited for the tone, checking his watch. 3:40 p.m., he said. The address is 29934 Burro Trail, Yucca Canyon. I'm going there now. Thelma Gallard watched him hang the receiver in its fork. Her face creased with worry. She wrung her hands. You'll find him now, won't you? You'll find Don? I'll find him. Dave gave her a quick smile and hurried out the door and down the stairs in the solemn rain. He didn't feel solemn. He felt elated. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.